Her smile and her name once belonged to the entire world. Yet the Farrah Fawcett most people knew was only a glimpse of the real woman beneath the fame. She herself was always caught off guard by the legends people built around her. In 2025, her name has surged back into the cultural conversation with remarkable force. Her bronze sculptures recently fetched $500,000 at auction. A new generation of young stars is recreating her signature hairstyle, and beauty salons across the country are reporting a 40% surge in clients requesting what stylists now call the Farrah flip. But none of that is the real reason people cannot stop talking about her. Fresh details about her final years are emerging from the shadows. The full picture of how Hollywood used and discarded her is finally being told, and what happened behind closed doors is far more disturbing than anyone imagined. She was never simply a glamorous face. She was a woman waging wars the public never saw. Farrah Fawcett entered the world on February 2, 1947, born Mary Farrah Lenny Fawcett in Corpus Christi, Texas. She was the younger of two daughters in a modest, tightly wound conservative household. Her mother, Pauline Alice, was a homemaker with Choctaw heritage, while her father, Kenyon Martin Fawcett, earned his living as an oil rig contractor. The family never had money to spare, so frugality became second nature. Farrah attended St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church School, where discipline and structure shaped her early character, building in her a sense of routine and a respect for rules that never fully left. Her older sister Diane eventually reinvented herself as Donna, but in those formative years, they were simply two girls navigating the same narrow streets and the same quiet family pressures together. From the time she was very small, Farrah radiated a creative energy that could not be contained. By the age of 5, she was already winning local art competitions, drawing and sculpting with skill and maturity that seemed to belong to someone twice her age, as if she stumbled upon some hidden gift and could not put it down. That creative fire only deepened as she grew. By the time she arrived at W.B. Ray High School in Corpus Christi, she was two things at once: the girl whose artwork left people speechless, and the girl who commanded a room simply by walking into it. For all 4 of her high school years, without a single exception, she was voted most beautiful by her peers. It was an uncommon distinction, and it quietly shaped her sense of self. Her teachers recognized something beyond her appearance. 2, a focused, disciplined mind that people will recall years later and say they had always sensed something extraordinary was coming. In 1965, that potential earned her a beauty scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin. She arrived with plans to study microbiology, settled into Mayfair House on Pearl Street, pledged the Delta 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 sorority, and tried to build a normal campus life. But ordinary life kept slipping away from her. Her photograph drew attention wherever it appeared, and after she was named one of the 10 most beautiful co-eds on campus, a Hollywood publicist took notice. Something clicked into place in her mind. At 18, she made a choice that stunned the people back home. In 1967, she left school and headed to Los Angeles with far more courage than certainty, chasing an acting career with very little to back her up beyond an unshakable inner conviction that she was supposed to be there. The city did not roll out any welcome mat. It pushed back hard. Casting rooms turned her away again and again. Work was so scarce that she grabbed whatever she could find, shampooing hair in salons, posing for print advertisements, stretching every dollar while trying to get her face in front of the right people. Then in 1969, she did something that divided opinions sharply and loudly. She posed nude for Esquire magazine. The response hit like an explosion. Some called it gutsy. Others predicted it would end her before she had truly begun. The criticism was fierce enough to make her genuinely fear she had destroyed her own future. And yet the exposure made her impossible to overlook, and doors that had been firmly shut began to inch open. Around the same period, her hair started taking on a life of its own. In the early 1970s, she embraced a feathered, free-flowing style that simply felt like her, the natural echo of the beach waves she had grown up loving along the Texas coast. Industry insiders dismissed it, deciding she looked too wholesome, too safe, too difficult to package in an interesting way. The public disagreed entirely. That look swept across the country like a tide. Posters and magazine covers bearing her image sold by the millions, and her hair transformed from a casting director's complaint into the defining aesthetic symbol of an entire decade. What the gatekeepers had dismissed as a liability became her most powerful calling card. Yet behind all that luminous attention, Farrah remained quietly shy. Fame never fully cured that. Even as her name grew larger, her parents back home still hoped she would give it all up in return. The Hollywood dream felt distant and dangerous to them, and she carried the weight of their worry even while chasing her own. In 1968, she made an attempt to redirect her path, traveling to Japan to pursue modeling work, and hoping a change of scenery might open fresh doors. What she found instead was isolation and the disorienting weight of culture shock. The experience taught her something important about how crushing fame can feel when you are unmoored from everything familiar. She returned to Los Angeles with a clearer head and a firmer resolve. If she was going to pursue this life, she would do it entirely on her own terms. The city received her back with momentum. Within just 2 weeks in the summer of 1968, she had signed with a major modeling agency. By the close of that year, she had appeared in more than 100 television commercials, lending her face to brands like Max Factor and Noxzema in rapid succession. People everywhere began calling her the girl next door. But even then, she maintained a firm personal boundary. When Playboy came knocking, and it was not alone, as other lucrative offers followed closely, she refused without hesitation. Her agents pushed hard, reminding her that nude work was a fast track to fame in that era. She refused anyway. It cost her opportunities in the short term, but established her as someone who would not allow the industry to define her on its own terms. Her path into film began in 1969 with a small French comedy called Love is a Funny Thing, directed by Claude Lelouch and shot partly at Old Tucson, Arizona. It opened in France on December 3, 1969. Her part amounted to little more than a wordless appearance as a college student, but it placed her on a real set under real directorial pressure for the first time. It was a beginning, however quiet. The following year, she secured her first speaking part in Myra Breckinridge, playing Marion opposite Raquel Welch in a film adapted from Gore Vidal's provocative novel. The production was chaotic, the subject matter explicit, and the finished film will be remembered more for its disorder than its artistry. Farrah herself would later describe it as the most sordid project Hollywood had ever thrown at her. She felt that her then-boyfriend Lee Majors had pushed her into accepting it, and the experience left a residue she found difficult to shake. The film bombed commercially, but paradoxically it widened her name recognition. Fame has a way of growing even in the wreckage. Throughout 1969 and 1970, she collected guest appearances on television series, including The Flying Nun and Mayberry RFD. The roles were minor, the audiences receptive. Behind the camera, however, a frustrating pattern kept asserting itself. Writers would quietly reshape her scenes to emphasize how she looked rather than what she could do. She felt compressed, reduced to a single dimension. That frustration sharpened something in her, a growing hunger for roles that would demand more from her, parts that would allow her to demonstrate she had a real interior life beyond a symmetrical face. Her personal world was accelerating at the same pace. In 1968, she had met Lee Majors on an Italian film set, and their connection ignited immediately, becoming the kind of high-profile romance that generates its own gravitational field in the press. The attention was useful to her career, but the relationship carried complications. Majors was said to want her to step back from modeling and center her life around him. People close to her observed the possessiveness, threading through his affection. Farrah refused to disappear into relationship. She kept working, but the pressure was quietly accumulating beneath the surface. Then 1976 detonated everything. Farrah posed for a red swimsuit photograph taken by Bruce McBroom, and when that image was released as a poster, it became a cultural phenomenon unlike anything that had come before it. More than 12 million copies eventually sold, making it the best-selling poster in American history, with over 6 million copies moving in the first year alone. Overnight, she became a symbol, not just of beauty, but of an era. Yet the adulation made her uncomfortable rather than elated. She despised being reduced to an image, to a body on a wall. In later shoots, she quietly engineered ways to incorporate her sculpture work into the frame, trying to redirect the public gaze toward her creative mind rather than her physical form. That same pivotal year, she stepped into the role of Jill Monroe on Charlie's Angels, which premiered on ABC on September 22, 1976. By the end of its first season, the show was drawing roughly 59% of television viewers. Nearly the entire country gathered around a single program. Farrah became a global phenomenon almost instantaneously. Her hair became as famous as her name. But the reality of her days on set was brutal. Shoots regularly stretched across 18-hour days. The press followed her relentlessly. And despite carrying the show on her shoulders, she was collecting just $5,000 per episode, a figure that bore no relationship to the commercial empire being built around her image. The breaking point was inevitable. She wanted Jill Monroe to be sharper, more dimensional, more fully human. The producers wanted her face. Meanwhile, at home, Majors grew increasingly resentful of her exploding fame, and the domestic tension compounded professional frustration until something had to give. By the time the first season concluded, her decision was already made. In 1977, after only 8 episodes, she walked away. Hollywood was stunned. She had turned her back on a contract worth approximately $7 million. Producers countered with an offer of $10,000 per episode. She declined. Her reasoning was rooted in simple arithmetic. Her poster royalties alone had generated around $400,000 that year, outstripping her entire season salary. She demanded 10% of the merchandising revenue she was generating, rather than the meager 2% she had been receiving. They said no. Then they came after her with a $13 million lawsuit and began maneuvering to have her blacklisted across the industry. The battle played out in full public view. Eventually, they reached a settlement, and she agreed to make 6 guest appearances. But the damage to her standing in Hollywood was real and lasting. The industry made her pay for the audacity of standing up for herself. Yet her defiance mattered beyond her own situation. It exposed how even the most famous performer could be systematically exploited, and how urgently actors needed to fight for control of their own image and commercial value. By the close of 1977, her face appeared on lunchboxes, board games, dolls, and dozens of other products, generating millions of dollars for nearly everyone except her. When Farrah stepped into Logan's Run in 1976 on the heels of her Angel's breakthrough, the results were disappointing. As Jessica, she failed to project the warmth and energy audiences had come to expect from her on television, something read as vacant and detached. The film itself was impressively mounted, a polished science fiction spectacle released on June 23, 1976, anchored by Michael York and Jenny Agutter, and it earned $25 million at the box office. But critics kept returning to Farrah as the production's weak point, noting that she had been rushed into the part without adequate preparation time, and it showed. For the first time since fame had found her, she stumbled visibly and publicly. Somebody Killed Her Husband arrived in 1978 and was supposed to establish her as a credible film lead. It became instead the subject of industry ridicule, with critics joking that a more accurate title might have been Somebody Killed Her Career. On a $4 million budget, it managed only $11 million in return. She shared the screen with Lee Majors, but the intimate scenes between them fed speculation about their troubled marriage rather than generating the chemistry the film needed. The relationship had been fracturing under the combined pressure of their competing careers and his jealousy, and by 1979, they were formally separated. The divorce was finalized in 1982. The collapse of both the film and the marriage simultaneously illustrated how rapidly and mercilessly the spotlight can distort everything it touches. Sunburn in 1979 found her attempting to reinvent herself as a dramatic lead, playing a con artist navigating the heat and danger of Acapulco and insisting on performing her own water stunts. The ambition was real, but the film was not. It earned only $6.7 million. The nude scenes generated criticism rather than admiration, and she later expressed regret about including them. Critics were unkind, handing her a Razzie nomination for Worst Actress. The wound was deepened by the fact that she had been trying genuinely to escape her Angel's persona, and the more deliberately she tried, the more trapped she seemed to become. Saturn III in 1980 brought her alongside Kirk Douglas and Harvey Keitel in a science fiction thriller that was troubled long before cameras rolled. The atmosphere on set was tense, and she was repeatedly pressured into explicit material she found genuinely threatening. A particularly graphic scene involving Keitel was ultimately removed after test screenings produced strongly negative reactions, but the experience of being pushed toward it stayed with her. The The film earned only $6.5 million and added another Razzie nomination to her growing and unwanted collection. It represented perhaps her lowest moment as a film actress, a concentrated illustration of how carelessly the industry was handling her. A brief reversal came with the Cannonball Run in 1981, which thundered to $100 million at the box office and reminded people that she still had undeniable screen presence. But even that success arrived at a cost. During production in June 1980, her stunt double Heidi Vaughn Belts was critically injured when a vehicle with defective steering and no functioning seat belts crashed. She was left permanently quadriplegic. The accident haunted Farrah and contributed directly to her decision to step back from roles requiring physical risk. Even triumph in Hollywood, she had learned, could carry a devastating price. By the early 1980s, the trap of typecasting had closed around her completely. She passed on multiple opportunities, including a role as a Bond girl, holding out for something that would be taken seriously. Her agents quietly suggested her moment was passing. By 1981, she was auditioning for daytime soap operas simply to maintain her footing. Poor financial decisions had quietly eroded her savings. She continued projecting composure and confidence while privately understanding that she had reached a genuine low point, a place made all the more painful by the memory of how recently she had been at the very center of everything. The turn came in 1984, and it came decisively. She took on a role of Francine Hughes in The Burning Bed, a real woman who had set fire to her abusive husband as the only escape she could imagine. The preparation was immersive and physically demanding. She rehearsed intensively for 2 weeks, submitted to being locked alone in a closet for 30 minutes to internalize her character's terror, and sat through marathon courtroom scenes on deliberately uncomfortable wooden chairs to keep her body in a state of sustained distress. The film's emotional climax, a single extended scream, was captured in one unbroken take, and when it was over, the entire crew stood in silence. When The Burning Bed aired on October 8, 1984, it recalibrated everything. The public and the critics saw someone they had badly underestimated. An Emmy nomination followed, and with the beginning of a new understanding of who she actually was as a performer. Still in 1984, she appeared in The Guardian as a defense attorney battling child abuse cases. The work she brought to the role had a raw, urgent quality, but NBC trimmed her most powerful scenes to satisfy broadcast standards. 6 episodes aired before the series ended. Even through the cuts, audiences could sense the intensity she was delivering. It underscored something that would remain true throughout her career. She consistently pushed against the limits of what the system would allow, and the system consistently pushed back. A year before The Burning Bed, in 1983, she had already begun the transformation on stage. She accepted the lead role in the Broadway production of Extremities, playing a woman who manages to turn the tables on her would-be attacker. The physical demands of the production were extreme. The stage violence was raw enough that she finished performances carrying real bruises. Security personnel were positioned near the stage because audience members occasionally became convinced they were witnessing something actually dangerous and felt compelled to intervene. She sought therapy between performances to process the emotional residue the role left behind each night. But the production fundamentally altered her reputation. Critics witnessed genuine courage. Audiences recognized genuine artistry. It was a performance that permanently dismantled the image that had been built around her against her will. In 1986, she translated that experience to the screen in the film version of Extremities, again opposite James Russo. The physical confrontations in the film were not choreographed approximations. The impact was real. When the original director was replaced, she adapted fluidly, improvising approximately 70% of her dialogue from instinct rather than script. The film earned $10 million and brought her a Golden Globe nomination. Beyond the commercial response, it provoked a serious national conversation about violence against women and proved beyond any remaining doubt that she could anchor something dark and morally complex with complete authority. Small Sacrifices in 1989 represented her most daring performance yet. She took on Diane Downs, a real woman who had shot her own 3 children in 1983. The preparation was meticulous, court transcripts, news footage, everything she could absorb, and the performance she assembled was deeply unsettling in its precision. A second Emmy nomination followed. The ethical debates about humanizing genuine criminals were loud and persistent, but no one questioned her craft. She had traveled an extraordinary distance from the days when reviewers reached for the word wooden to dismiss her. In 1991, she returned to work with Ryan O'Neal in the comedy series Good Sports. Behind the cameras, the experience was difficult. O'Neal's struggle with alcohol created constant disruptions, forcing rewrites and generating delays, and Farrah frequently had to improvise entire scenes when he was unable to deliver. 17 episodes aired before the show was canceled. Her composure and professionalism under those conditions left a strong impression on everyone who witnessed it. She simply refused to let things fall apart around her. Ruby Cairo in 1992 cast her as a widow following the trail of her husband's hidden fortune across international borders. The film carried a $15 million budget and returned only $7.7 million, losing $9 million in the process. Critics pointed to a meandering plot and inconsistencies in her accent work. The disappointment cut deeply enough that she stepped back from acting for a period and redirected her energy into sculpture, the quiet creative practice she had carried with her since childhood and never fully set aside. That shift produced something remarkable. In 1997, she mounted a solo exhibition of 19 bronze sculptures depicting male nudes. Individual pieces carried price tags as high as $300,000, each marked with her distinctive notation, Farrah 7/9, and similar inscriptions, signaling her serious engagement with the work. Critical opinion divided sharply. Some reviewers found sophistication and technical mastery in her pieces, drawing comparisons to Rodin. Others were dismissive, categorizing the work as a celebrity's expensive pastime. Collectors made their own judgment by purchasing the pieces, and she continued pressing forward, driven by the same determination to be taken seriously that had defined her entire life. Also in 1997, she joined Robert Duvall for The Apostle, shot in the rural landscapes of Louisiana. Their working methods were fundamentally incompatible. Duvall was a committed improviser, while she preferred thorough preparation, and the friction generated significant tension and multiple reshoots. She had invested her own money in the production, which added financial vulnerability to the creative stress. The finished film, however, received genuine critical respect for its authenticity, and her willingness to take that kind of risk for material she believed in said everything about her priorities. In 1998, she made a brief and warmly received appearance on Ally McBeal as Robin Jones, her scenes carrying a lightness and self-awareness that audiences responded to with obvious affection. She declined a longer commitment to the series, preferring to pursue more demanding work, including Hollywood Wives in 2003, where she sought the kind of layered, morally complicated characterization that interested her most. The Cookout in 2004 brought a different challenge. A comedic role as a wealthy socialite crashing an informal neighborhood barbecue. The film had a $16 million budget and earned $12 million. Critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it 5%. The prevailing sentiment was clear. Hollywood had simply stopped making room for older actresses in work of any real substance. Farrah understood this reality intimately, and she kept moving anyway. In 2005, she invited cameras into her private world through Chasing Farrah, a documentary that opened a window onto her sculpture studio, her interior life following her troubled relationship with Ryan O'Neal, and the unguarded moments that stardom normally conceals from view. The ratings were unremarkable, but her willingness to be genuinely honest captured attention in a different way. The performed version of herself was gone. What remained was a real person, and people found that person worth knowing. Farrah married Lee Majors on July 28, 1973, in a ceremony at the Hotel Bel Air that unfolded like a cinematic fantasy. Her affection for Indian culture gave the celebration a richness and vibrancy. Vivid colors, ceremonial music, rituals that made the space feel transported to somewhere else entirely. The celebrity guest list was long, and the flashbulbs relentless. Everyone who witnessed it called them Hollywood royalty, the union of two luminous careers that felt destined to endure. The early years delivered on that promise. But by 1979, the foundation had developed cracks too deep to conceal. Major's identity had been built around his starring role in The $6 Million Man, and as Farrah's fame expanded beyond anything either of them had anticipated, his jealousy became a daily presence. He imposed controlling demands about domestic routine. He locked her out of their share home on more than one occasion. The distance between their careers and the heat of their conflicts widened until the marriage finally gave way in 1982. Fans who believed in them as a permanent fixture in the cultural landscape were genuinely shocked. What followed the divorce was a love story of a different and more complicated kind. Her involvement with Ryan O'Neal, which had begun in 1979, consumed nearly 30 years of her emotional life. They were drawn to each other with an intensity that repeatedly reunited them even after separations and betrayals. The birth of their son Redmond in 1985 pulled them together with particular force. But Ryan's pattern of infidelity persisted and ultimately delivered its most painful blow on Valentine's Day in 1997, when Farrah arrived unannounced at his Malibu home and discovered him with a young actress named Leslie Stevenson. The scene that followed had an almost absurd quality, Ryan scrambling to dress himself so frantically that both legs went into one trouser leg, while Leslie concealed herself beneath the bed covers. Farrah did not scream or collapse. She asked the young woman her name with quiet composure, then walked out of the room. She said afterward that the devastation was real, but the surprise was not. The relationship never healed from that moment. In that same turbulent year, she made another stand, this one legal. After discovering that she had been systematically underpaid for her Emmy-nominated work on Small Sacrifices, she filed suit against her own production company and pursued the case through the courts. She prevailed, recovering $1.5 million in compensation owed to her. The Hollywood establishment was unsettled by the spectacle of the star suing her own employers over unpaid residuals. It simply was not done, and those who found it inconvenient made their displeasure felt, quietly withdrawing their favor. But she earned something more durable than their approval. She earned the respect of people who recognized that she would consistently choose what was right over what was comfortable. That same year brought yet another assault on her sense of safety, this time physical. Producer and director James attacked her during an argument, slamming her head against the ground and causing real injury. He was arrested, prosecuted, and convicted. Farrah stood in court and testified, using the public nature of the case to illuminate how men in positions of creative and financial power could weaponize that authority to harm the women around them. The trial generated national conversation and pushed the entertainment industry's treatment of women into sharper public focus. Running quietly alongside all of this for more than 3 decades was her relationship with Greg Lott. They had first connected at the University of Texas, and their bond persisted largely in private through all the years of her public marriages and relationships. They found each other again in 1998, and he became the steady emotional presence she leaned on during her most difficult periods with Ryan. The depth of their connection only became fully visible after her death, when Hurwitz directed $100,000 to him, a private confirmation of everything he had maintained about what they had meant to each other. It revealed a dimension of her inner life that her public image had never suggested, quieter, more vulnerable, and far more private than the luminous figure the world thought it knew. Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, whispers about drug dependency circulated around her, partly amplified by Ryan's own well-documented history with substance abuse. Farrah had quietly entered rehabilitation in 1982 and navigated her recovery without public acknowledgement. She kept it private for years. Then in 1997, she chose to speak openly about her experience in a Playboy interview, determined to address the shame that surrounds addiction honestly and directly. The candor surprised and moved many people, who found themselves seeing her for the first time as fully human rather than as an untouchable ideal. In September 2006, a new and far more serious battle began. At 59, she was diagnosed with stage 0 anal cancer. The tumor was described by her doctors as approximately the size of a strawberry. She began chemotherapy and radiation treatment at UCLA and declined a colostomy, unwilling to compromise the quality of her daily life. On February 2, 2007, her 60th birthday, her medical team declared her cancer-free. She allowed herself a quiet celebration while remaining guarded, choosing not to share the news publicly. 3 months later, in May 2007, the cancer returned and had spread to her liver. The speed of the recurrence startled even her physicians. Rather than retreat into silence, she chose transparency. She asked her close friend Alana Stewart to document the entire experience on camera as it unfolded. insisting on an honest record rather than a curated one. Alana was initially reluctant, but Farrah was resolute. The resulting documentary, Farrah's Story, aired on NBC in 2009 and drew nearly 9 million viewers. It showed hospital treatments, hair loss, sleepless nights, and the grinding daily reality that most patients endure behind closed doors. She wanted the world to see what it actually looks like, not the softened, presentable version that celebrity usually demands. Still driven by the search for any available option, she traveled to Germany in 2007 to pursue experimental treatment at the University Clinic in Frankfurt. Reports suggested she received stem cell therapies unavailable in the United States. The details were never fully confirmed, and the treatments themselves were both physically grueling and the subject of significant medical controversy. She navigated language barriers, skepticism from American physicians, and the exhausting uncertainty of not knowing whether any of it would work. Patients facing similar circumstances found her willingness to look beyond conventional medicine deeply courageous, whatever the outcome. Her final months carried burdens beyond the physical. Cher, in a memoir published in 2025, disclosed that Farrah had expressed a profound wish to spend her remaining days at Cher's home in Malibu, close to the ocean she had loved her entire life. Cher recounted that Ryan refused the arrangement, telling her instead that Farrah could remain at his residence if proximity to the sea was what she wanted. The revelation gave the closing chapter of her story an additional painful complexity. Ryan and Alana remained with her at the end. But Cher's account left people wondering how much she had been asked to surrender even in her final weeks. The will she had written in 2007 directed $4.5 million to her son Redmond and initially excluded Ryan entirely. He was later allocated $25,000 earmarked specifically for artwork, while the bulk of her estate passed to Redmond and her father. She designated $3.3 million for Farrah Fawcett Foundation, and that institution grew into the most enduring expression of who she was. By 2025, it had raised more than $10 million for cancer research and was actively supporting over 100 scientific studies worldwide. She remained engaged in its work until she no longer had the strength to speak. Her advocacy for affordable cancer treatment and her willingness to champion unconventional research permanently reshaped the conversation about what celebrity philanthropy can accomplish and what it can mean. Farrah died at 9:28 on the morning of June 25, 2009, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica. Ryan and Alana were at her side. Her funeral was held on June 30th at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, and she was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park beside Rodney Dangerfield. Former cast members from Charlie's Angels came to pay their respects. Fans mourned her with a tenderness that went beyond admiration for her beauty. They mourned her for the extraordinary courage it had taken to allow the world to witness her dying. By 2025, the story she had left behind continued to expand. The Farrah Fawcett Foundation hosted a Tex-Mex Fiesta Gala drawing celebrities, including Martina McBride, and setting new fundraising records. Her feathered hairstyle reclaimed its place in contemporary fashion, with salons reporting that 40% more clients were requesting the Farrah flip following the renewed attention Cher's memoir generated. Young performers arrived on red carpets wearing updated interpretations of the look, softened with modern layering techniques and heat-protective products suited to current styling practices. The Charlie's Angels franchise continued drawing on the template she had established. The reboots of 2000 and 2019 both modeled their central female characters on the independence, physical confidence, and emotional complexity she had brought to Jill Monroe. In 2025, Cher revealed that Farrah had harbored hopes of seeing another version of the franchise before she died. Fans responded by returning to old footage and archived interviews, re-encountering the woman who had defined the show's essential spirit. Redmond O'Neal, meanwhile, continued to struggle. Since 2008, he had faced a series of arrests connected to addiction. His mother's will had structured his inheritance specifically to try to protect him. The $4.5 million placed in a trust with disbursements limited to interest payments designated for medical costs. But financial protection and emotional recovery are not the same thing, and his difficulties became an unintended dimension of her legacy. They serve as a reminder that even the most devoted love and the most thoughtful financial planning cannot guarantee another person's peace. In November 2025, photographs of the grave site where Farrah and Ryan now rest side by side at Westwood circulated widely online. Visitors continued to arrive with flowers and handwritten notes. That same month, her bronze sculptures commanded prices reaching $500,000 at auction, astonishing people would spend decades knowing only one version of her. Cher's memoir, which had been released on November 19th, 2025, placed her story at the center of public conversation once again, particularly the moment when Ryan had denied her final wish to be near the water. The response online was immediate and emotional. People shared her photographs, revisited her interviews, debated her relationships, and refused to let her name fade. What her life ultimately represents is something larger than any single chapter of it. Love and loss woven together, fame and its true cost laid bare, and a bravery that expressed itself not in grand gestures, but in the quiet daily decision to face everything honestly, all the way to the end.